Hey everyone, it's Josh here. So Caleb and I couldn't get together to record this, so we did it online. But I guess something weird happened with the internet, either for both of us or one of us, because we recorded it with the video, but his video kept cutting out in the final product and getting delayed. But his audio was fine, and then my audio was getting all janky, but the video was fine. So we turned this into an audio podcast, and I just wanted to let you know if you go in and you hear my voice crackling, that's why, or sounding more like animatronic, that's why we will hopefully be able to do some more in-person recordings or have better internet connection. But I guess it all kind of depends on weather. But all I have to say, I hope you guys enjoy this episode, and Lord willing, we'll see you guys in the next one.
Mount up. Are you ready for the Call to Defend podcast? Because I sure am. It is 10:35 at night, and this is the quality that you're gonna get. I'm Caleb Elliott, and this is Josh Davis. How you doing?
Oh my goodness, I'm doing great. I'm used to you going, welcome to the Call to Defend podcast, and then insert really bad joke. But you started with the bad joke. You're like, mount up.
What's up? We're gonna be talking about mountains today. It felt appropriate.
Well, we're going to be talking about mountains for the next little bit, I guess you could say.
I'm gonna have so many rock puns.
I know you do.
That's how I roll,
It's gonna be
baby.
fun. So,
Get it? Like rock and roll.
oh my goodness. So we came to this idea, what was it? I'm going to say a month ago we came to this idea.
Maybe a little longer, actually.
Maybe a little longer than a month ago. We were talking about, I remember we were talking about Jesus
We do that a lot.
in Matthew, where we were looking at when he is about to walk
Yes.
onto the Colossae.
Yes.
Before that, he's on a mountain. And then I don't know if I left this in the official podcast, but I said that'd be a great thing to do a study on. And so then I proceeded to buy a bunch of books
Because
to
you have a
then-
problem.
to then start like pulling together stuff, and then have been writing notes based on biblical texts for the past little bit. And I was like, we should do this. And you were like, all right, let's do it. It'd be really cool. And so we ended up with mountains, which I can already hear some of my friends being like, why mountains? Because when I said we were doing waters, they're like,
Because they are
why
peak.
water?
Got him. You hate yourself for laughing, but it was funny.
But yes, they were like, why water? You know, like, that just seems so weird and boring. Like, why that? And we're like, well, you pay attention to what the authors are doing is really, really cool what's going on.
Mhm.
Mountains does not fall short of that. It has a different description or like things that are going on, whereas like the waters we saw, they dealt with like the forces of chaos, creation and decreation, recreation. We didn't really talk about this much, but I was going through one of my Bibles and I was marking every single instance of water that I could. I was tracing all the Hebrew words for it. And you see so many times where water is also described as this thing that is in God's hands, a source provides life, like life-giving water or of nourishment. And so this beautiful thing of in God's hands, it's one thing, and the other hand, or absent of his hands, it's something else. Anyways, all to say, like, you see some cool biblical imagery is happening. And this is very similar to that. Mountains have a lot of different, I guess you could say, opportunities within the text for the reader to be situated with, where they're like, okay, we have a mountain here. What kind of event is this going to be? That's what we kind of get with some of these. Now, you kind of get, eventually you see a repetition for some of them, but there's still some variation in like what the mountain does and what the mountain is for. So we kind of decided to talk about a little bit about the overarching concept of mountains within the biblical narrative and cultural concept. And then we would begin actually dive into the text with the next episode. But just kind of give the backdrop. I don't think we did that with the Chaos Waters. I think we just I threw you and our listeners just right into it.
Which
without
honestly,
any.
thematically is fitting.
I know, but I just threw you guys right in and did not give you any chance to really figure out what was going on. It was like, what? And so we had to wrap our heads around that. I remember we kind of talked about it off to the side. And then I remember actually one of your youth group boys came up and asking me saying, Caleb mentioned this. What does that mean? I was like, okay, let me help you out here. But yeah, so we're going to do mountains. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be different, but it's going to be really cool. And I think the fun thing about this is we're going to be talking less about like chaos. Mountains, we're going to get a couple of rough moments, but so many of them are going to be these really cool God moments too. And so it's going to be like a very different concept or time to be together. But Caleb, I guess before I kind of get into it, do you have any background with mountains at all regarding the Bible, or like any idea what might be happening?
Well, I was going to crack a joke, and then you added the caveat regarding the Bible. But so you got out in front of me there.
I know. That's why I threw that in there. I could see the gears turning, and I wanted to catch you off guard.
That's not
cut you off.
Yeah. You more shut me down before I could get going. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you were going to set up a punt. I was trying to beat you to it.
I'll get there. Don't worry.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, we won't quarry about it much.
Is this going to be like all series?
So many. There's going to be so many, and they're just going to get bolder and bolder and bolder.
Stop.
Oh man. No, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the Transfiguration, and I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
That's a passage that I'm pretty familiar with. You and I discussed very briefly in the Sermon on the Mount how there's a lot happening there with the word mount. But so we'll probably talk about that because you came up to me like, yo, this is really cool. And I was like, yeah, buddy, I know. Which felt so good. I finally got to do that to you. I have texted Josh with stuff before. I'm like, yo, this is really cool. And he's like, yeah, buddy, it is. And I'm like, you already knew, didn't you? And he's like, yeah, I did. And I was like, all right, well, so I was happy that I finally got to do that to you. Of like, you came up to me, you was like, yo, this is so cool. I didn't even realize this. And I was like, yes.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do like as much with the Sermon on the Mount as I would love to do. We're probably going to be talking more about
and it doesn't really
the location and a structure.
Yeah. Right.
But there's a word in there that we're going to do a word study on. We will get to talk about that
as the Lord wills it.
Let the Lord wills it, yeah. But yeah, let's get into mountains.
I guess I'm done.
Oh, go ahead.
No, and then I was just going to talk about Genesis 22 as well. It's a pretty pretty important passage that I'm very well familiar with how the mountain plays into that. So
yeah, we're going to be definitely getting into that one. It'll be a good time. So one of the books that was kind of helpful to me, at least for this overarching one, is by Richard Clifford, called The Cosmic Mountain in Canaan and the Old Testament. It's a good read. It's a little difficult read, just because I guess it's very different than what I'm used to. But what he does is he goes through the ancient Near Eastern context of like different moments where they have like a cosmic mountain, such like with Baal or just a variety of different beings. And then he gets into Canaan with the Old Testament and looking at how the Old Testament looks at it briefly. And he mentions that there's some people who kind of push too much on the cosmic mountain for the entirety of the ancient Near East, but within the immediate neighbors of Israel and Israel itself, the mountain does play a lot into its literary focus and a lot into its ancient Near Eastern understanding of the cosmos. I guess that's where we should probably start, is what mountains were kind of looked at. And I guess because we did an episode on this, not in our podcast, but in our classroom series, I can kind of do a nice little brief introduction for this. So mountains, as we know, are mountains. So if we think about the ancient Near Eastern cosmos, there is a three-tier system. You have Shamayim, so the upper waters or the heaven, with the Rakia holding back the waters. So that's why it's referred to as like the upper waters. At least that's why I prefer to translate it, because that's basically what it's saying. You then have the Eretz, which would be the land, and then you have the Mayim or the Yam or the Tehom, which would be the waters of the deep, the waters beneath the land. And so you have this three-tier structure, and within the land, there are obviously, mountains and hills, of which the Bible doesn't really spend time distinguishing the difference between hills and mountains. They sometimes use hills and describe them like it's a mountain. Oh, it's interesting is there's times where it's like a smaller mountain, but it will then say that this is the biggest mountain of mountains. But you're like down the road, like in your like eyesight, is a mountain much bigger. And so it's making a theological claim of this is like the highest mountain. This is the higher place to be, because it is God's mountain rather than Baal's mountain or El's mountain, or pick a god and throw in mountain. It's greater than theirs because it is Yahweh's mountain. But the reason they looked at it as a God's mountain was partially due to their understanding of the cosmos. So if you have a metal thing that they believe is holding up the chaos water, if you will, there's something that is holding up said, metal bowl. And so one of the concepts they had was perhaps the pillars for the sky was these mountains, because they looked like they touched the skies. Humans weren't really known for climbing the mountains. As part of their test really was are you going to ascend the mountain to the gods? Are you going to come up when the gods beckon you, or are you going to step away? And so they would climb up to the mountain, and that's where you would have people like Moses or Elijah.
Genesis 22 intensifies.
Yes, where they would climb the mountain and then in a position where they can be in the presence of the deity that they're there to be with. And so they thought of the mountains as being this place that held up the rakia, held up the bowl, and that they would ascend to communicate with the gods or to be in the presence of the gods. Another way they thought about the mountain was that not only was it the thing that held up, so you could go up to like closer to the heavens to where they were, they thought of it as like that was the place of the gods, which is very evident in Roman mythology, where you have the Greek gods. They're up in the mountains. They believed that it wasn't just like the thing that held up the sky, but it was the thing that was where you would go, where the gods resided. And of course, the difference is that with the Israelites is that their God resides on his throne above yes, he's like up there with the chaos waters, and he just passes through all the different domains, if you will, or different levels of the cosmos, and is all just his. Whereas the other ones, they have different boundaries of this is mine, this is yours, I'm God of this, you're God of that. But you would go up to the mountain, and this is where you would be like in the presence of gods. This is where you would go to be with the God. Again, Baal is known for this, where his big frustration at one point was like, I don't have my own temple and I don't have my own mountain. Gimme. I want my own place. I am the guy. Gimme my stuff. And so he gets his sister to help him out, and then he dies, or he goes to battle with death.
I mean, how much of the guy are you if you don't have your own mountain?
Yeah. But that's how they kind of viewed this. At least a lot of their neighboring brothers. Not all, obviously, but a lot of their neighboring brothers kind of viewed it this way.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting there how you talk about like the gods having their mountain, right? Like Baal had his mountain, and obviously Olympus was huge for the Greeks.
Yes.
And, just all these various different mountains. And like, yes, God, Yahweh, has Sinai, but he also has Horeb. He also has Mount of Olives, Mount Carmel. I kind of like that because it's
Zion.
Like Zion. He's kind of like, yeah, this is all mine.
Yeah.
Each of you has your own little mountain. That's real cute. I made the mountains. They're all mine.
Well, that's also kind of the fun thing too, where like I said, like he might even claim a hill for himself, which is like smaller than the other mountains. And he's like, yeah, mine's greater. Just because I'm here. Well, the mere fact that I'm here, this is better. Which is really kind of just kind of a fun little shot at the gods for that point, or these other Elohim, if you will. And so that's kind of part of their backdrop of like the cosmic, I guess you could significance, was that this is the place that went up to the heavens, and some viewed it as perhaps holding up the heavens, or it just went up to it. And that's where the gods were. If you wanted to go to be with the gods, you would go up there. Now, I mentioned the three-tier system. So we're going to get into this more when we hit later in the Torah, but there are different ways in which mountains are looked at also regarding the Bible. So obviously there is the physical place itself. Like there's like actual geographical locations they would go to. Like Abraham is not just being told to go to a mountain of like theological nothingness. It's like it's just not merely theological. It's like, just go here and I'm going to call him out. It's like, no, he's actually going to an actual place. Like you can pull up a topographic map or look at the geography. You can see this is where they would have been.
Right. Which is a really nice reminder that we serve a God who incarnated for us.
Yes.
Right. We are not Docetists. That they were in fact Gnostic heretics. Because, right, and this kind of also plays a little bit into Buddhism, but that's a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
Like the rejection of the physical world, right, and then the seeking of the spiritual, right. And we always talk about the world as this place where, the world is the flesh, right, and the flesh is bad. The flesh is all bad. No, right. I mean, certainly we consider fleshly desires bad, but that's also kind of a corrupting of what was intended to be good, right? And so, yes, the act of sin is incarnate in the, if you will, in the eating of the fruit, but the eating of the fruit is not itself what was the sin, right? I mean, it's incarnate in that action, but the sin itself was the rejection of God. Right. It's a good reminder that we do live in an incarnate world, in a physical world, and God made that world physical.
Mm-hmm.
He made it so that the mountain that you go to is a real place, but that there is spiritual significance to it, right? There is a physical aspect with spiritual significance to it. That is just life itself.
Yeah. Which is kind of the fun thing. I was talking to a friend about this, how if you're coming at the Bible purely for just historical or just theological, you're kind of shorthanding it because you're putting an expectation on the literature from our expectations that are not of their expectations. And you're like almost building a false dichotomy of like, oh, well, if it can't be like theological in this way or like have this spiritual significance because that means you're downplaying its historical significance. It's like, or you're saying it's not true. It's like, well, no, they may play with the language to describe something very real, but they're describing with a very theological language. They're describing something that happened with something that was very real to them, the way they saw it. And they saw it to be as this theological or this very spiritual moment, kind of like where we didn't get into this, but there's a passage in Genesis where is with Abraham, and I think it's shortly before Melchizedek comes into the scene, but you see there's these nations are starting to get into battle with each other, and the language that surrounds it is the same language of Genesis 6, of describing the people pre-flood, which means there's a flood coming. But it's not a flood that happens. So, but they're playing to that language of something that's really real to them.
It is, in a sense, a decreation. Because I can assure you, many people were decreated in that battle.
Right.
borrowing the language there from the Exodus Red Sea parting. Many people were decreated on that day.
But that's what you're getting. Like you're getting, they're not describing anything less real as the way it was, what they saw it as, what it meant to them. And so we have to understand what their expectations are, because then it kind of helps us understand the significance. And it's the same with like, if it's theological, it can't be historical. It's like, therefore we shouldn't. It's like, well, no, it maybe like it didn't happen literally in this exact way, but it still happened. It just may be like theologically flourishing with what is happening to make a point.
Exactly. And then so it's kind of not quite hyperbolic is not the right word, but
Sure.
you can compare it to using hyperbole, right? So like today it was actually, I said to my daughter who's in the backseat, I was like, wow, Harper, that guy's flying. Now, okay, I didn't mean he was, flying, but it conveys the meaning of an actual event that's taking place, that the guy was going way too fast.
Yeah, exactly. And so these were very real places for them. They weren't just like random mountains or just random like here, throw this in there, mountain or hill. Like it was an actual place for them. Another resource that's really helpful for me is called the Dictionary of Biblical Imagery. And what they do is they kind of take specific images and they provide you the different categories in which the biblical authors use. And they give you a little kind of a neat category of trying to understand what's going on. So for their description of like physical specificity, like where these places were, one of the things they say is, although mountains and hills are a prime source of symbol and metaphor in the Bible, they are also an important physical phenomenon of the world of the Bible. Mountains and hills have always been significant natural barriers that readily became geographic and political boundaries, such as in Joshua 15, where extreme conditions make them barren and often sparsely populated. Their unchanging appearances make them a measure of permanence and solidity. And so, like, you have things like their steep slopes, which makes it strategic for fortress sites, or there's like these little hiding spots if you want to be able to take refuge or run away, or if you want to sneak up on someone that's straight. So this was all, like I said, this is also part of like their description of like their boundaries, their borders. Like, you know that you're in this land, or you're approaching this land, or you're like, oh, I'm not going to climb that mountain because that mixture of the actual physical peril that could come with it, and also the theological significance of we're stepping into this God's territory. And are we about to go up there without our God, or are we going to try and go up there with him and to conquer this, to fight this? Or are we going to go by our own sense and there go without God and lose to them because we don't have Yahweh with us?
Yeah. Yeah, I couldn't help but think about the conquest of Jericho. Well, you were talking about that and how you're talking about, well, the walls or the siege are important. And I was like, well, okay, there's Jericho. And then it's the comment that Rahab makes of, we know your God is with you.
Yeah.
Right. And it's that crossing into that land of Canaan. And the Canaanites are like, well, we know the God of the Israelites is with them. And it's like, well, you're right. And he's also your God. You just don't know it yet. Right?
Yeah.
He's also God over all things. You just don't know it yet.
Your gods are actually his subjects too.
Exactly.
Your Elohim, he's the one that created them. They're also in rebellion. Like, it's that boss move of like, oh, right. Your gods don't exist unless I exist. Even if they didn't have an actual Elohim over them, it's like, oh, the very material you have to make your idols for, like, yeah, I made that. You're just using it the way you're not supposed to.
Exactly.
It's funny how you think you can do things apart from me. But yeah, so that's kind of playing into the physical category of what these were, which then brings us to another set of categories. So another set of categories would be such as sacred sites. I kind of mentioned this already with the idea of like, this is where the gods would be, like to go up to the mountain is their domain. But also, I'll come back to that in a second because we'll spend a lot of time with that in Genesis 2. Mountains themselves are also the precursor for tabernacles and temples. They're the original setup for which the tabernacle and temples are based on mountains, which are based on Eden, which are based on the cosmos, which is based on God's throne room. It's just this constant flow of microcosms. Because with a mountain, you have like the peak point, like the highest point, and that's where you go to ascend, to converse with the God. And then you would have like the mid-terrain, or like the base, and then you have the field outside of that. So you have holy of holies, holy place, courtyard, and then outside. Same with the cosmos. Heavens, which is God's domain, the heavenly realm, the skies, the Eretz, the deep waters, the tabernacle, holy holies, holy place, courtyard, and then outside. One scholar we're going to get into when especially a little bit in Genesis, but especially when we get to Leviticus, is L. Michael Morales. His books, I read 2 of them in preparation for our projects, one on the Exodus and one on the mountains, specifically on the placement of Leviticus within the Torah from a literary standpoint. Oh my goodness. The sheer amount of things that I never even caught from just a literary standpoint. So, I mean, obviously, I'll just give a little little sneak peek. Leviticus is at the center, and it, as he kind of argues, has its own little mountain structure within Leviticus, with at the center of it being the Day of Atonement. And so the center of the Torah is the Day of Atonement. But then he says if you go up the mountain, the parts after the Day of Atonement parallel the things before the Day of Atonement, and then you start to make your way down into the rest of the Torah, where Exodus and Numbers parallel each other and its language and structure, and Genesis and Deuteronomy parallel each structure. And this whole thing is how this whole Torah thing is its own little mountain, with Leviticus at the center, at the center of the center is the Day of Atonement, which is the very sacrifice that, like, all the sacrifices are like, they describe as Christ fulfilling, but the Day of Atonement is most explicitly described as one that Christ fulfilled, which shows that he is fulfilling the Torah at its most center point, and as it pours out into everything else. There's so much more to talk about there. I'm saving all of that for when we get to Leviticus. It is such a great read, though. I highly recommend his work. He goes over some of the same stuff in his Exodus Old and New book. That's also pretty good. It's kind of like tracing Exodus themes, building up to what the cases are, and then seeing how they play out through the rest of the Bible. But all I have to say is that he goes on for a good while, like once he establishes the very thing I was just describing, that the mountains are like a temple tabernacle, or a precursor of the temple and tabernacle. He then shows how almost all these sacrifices or rituals, rites, or whatever are tied to the idea of preparing to ascend the mountain into God's presence.
Yeah. So I really like how you laid out, and this is jumping back a little bit. I like how you laid out that the mountain is kind of like the picture of the throne room, and how that's reflected in all of creation. And it made me realize, as you were describing, like kind of how the biblical cosmos is looked at, where you have heavenly realm, right? Like the sky, essentially, the land, and then the water. It made me realize, I mean, I already kind of understood, but it made me realize even more, why Genesis 11 is like such an egregious action.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like, of why it is so, like, for lack of a better word, blasphemous.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how it's this, like, complete and total utter defiance of God.
Yeah. We're going to get there in the Genesis 11 part, but the idea of what they're doing with the tower.
Mean to jump the shark.
No. We'll go in more detail there, but the idea of what they're building, is almost every scholar I've read from describes as a ziggurat, which would be like their temple. And what they say to do is that this tower is going to reach into the heavens. Their goal is to get back into that godly heavenly realm without God, without him being part of it. Which is why I kind of talked about.
And that doesn't happen today.
No. But I went over that a little bit in our Exodus live stream and a little bit in our Exodus class on Chaos Monsters, on how the language of Exodus chapter 1 calls back on Genesis 11 and all the ones previous, but specifically Genesis 11, where it mentions the brick and mortar, which is the very material that they come up with to build Babylon, to build the Tower of Babylon. And before, it was just them doing it. And the Exodus were like enslaving people before them. So it's like this, we're taking it up another step of this. We're going apart from God. Not only are we just going apart from God, we're now like oppressing all these people, specifically God's people. Like the ones we know is Yahweh's people. We're going to basically enslave them and force them to do these things for us in disobedience to him, which is a wild concept to even think about going so far. But then again, that's something we just so frequently do, which ties me to like another thing regarding mountains. Mountains sometimes are testing spots in regards to what you'll do on top of the mountain or whether or not you'll ascend the mountain. And we're going to see, I think, the most explicit one based on the fact that it just outright tells you with like Abraham, how what he has to do is when he has to ascend the mountain with Isaac is his test. And there's other moments where there's testings. And tests, I like how Tim Mackey puts it. Tests are are there to reveal to yourself and those outside of you your true intentions and who you truly are. James gets into this a little bit about how the tests are not really for the benefit of God, but they're meant to kind of reveal your faith and the true idea of who you actually are comes out in those testing moments when you're pressed on a little bit of like, what are you actually going to do about this? Are you going to respond in faith or are you going to respond in disobedience?
Right. And it's that, again, to kind of tie it back to the physical a little bit here. Climbing a mountain isn't easy.
No.
It is hard work, especially when you're fat and out of shape like me. It is difficult work to climb a mountain. It is in itself a test. Right. And so to think about, and I don't want to get too far ahead of you, but to think about Genesis 22, where the physical action of climbing the mountain with the firewood and, with all of that, all of the stuff that comes with that to make a burnt offering. And that's not the heaviest thing that Abraham is carrying up that mountain. And that's not the actual work that he's doing. Right. So I love how God just does things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Where he's like, yes, this ascension of the mountain, this test is in a sense a physical one, but your mind is not occupied on the physical challenge in front of you. There is more at play here than just going up a mountain.
Yeah. We're going to get into, I have many thoughts on that concept as I'm taking my notes down. But I think the intriguing part is that why the test is there. The test is necessary because of the sheer amount of times God has told Abraham something, and Abraham then takes matters into his own hands. And it's like, this testing was like, all right, I provided you your son, the promise. Give it back. And it's all a test. Is he going to return Isaac to him? Because he knows that this is the promise. And so you imagine like that idea of like he's ascending the entire time up the mountain, also knowing that this is the promised child, the one that he's promised. And he's like, what is happening here? You promised me this, but also Hebrews looks back on it, it's like he also believed that he could bring him back. So much to say there, so much to say, but then we'll be kind of diving into the whole Bible study itself. And so I'll stay on some of those things for later. So I guess a couple more small little things. So just to sum up, we have it being this actual geographical location for like boundaries and wars and stuff. You have it being this cosmological significance regarding the idea of its place in the cosmos, of holding up the skies in some cases, or being the place that you could go to commune with the gods. Either they would come down to you there, or that's where the gods lived, depending on your mythology. Also being a place of testing, and then it being like a sacred spot like tabernacles and temples. But then there's also like how the biblical imagery dictionary describes as apocalyptic mountains. So I'll read what they have to say. If Psalm is one main locus of mountain imagery, because they go on to say how much the poets like use mountains to describe like, hey, our little mountain is actually bigger than your mountain. And they play so much in this mountain imagery of describing either what scholars call cosmic geography, or God's power over things, or the idea of God's promises with like Sinai or Zion and these places that of significance for the Israelites. So all to say, if Psalm is one main locus of mountain imagery, the visionary books are the other. In a sense, all the motifs converge here. Given the way the physical elements become actors in apocalyptic visions, it is not surprising that the mountain figures prominently in the prophetic books, such as Isaiah 5, Jeremiah 4, Ezekiel 38, etc., them being poetic in style, these visions naturally take mountain hills as sources of figurative language. And in visions of God's transformation of the world, mountains are participants in God's judgment against evil, an evil world, and the locus of his blessing on a renewed world. So you have mountains sometimes being a place of revealing. It's a place of God's revealing his intentions of either judgment or a blessing. Or what we have in, I think it's
Which,
in the Torah.
yeah.
In the Torah, you have this moment where Israel's going two different mountains and they're casting out blessings and curses of what God says to do. But now you have with the apocalyptic literature on these mountains, there's a revealing of what's to come, of something that God's about to do.
Yeah. Which I just wanted to throw the quick thing out there that most people don't know, that the word apocalypse is not like end of the world.
Yes.
It's more about revelation.
Right.
It's not this doomsday is coming. It's, hey, this is something that God said. Right. So when we call Revelation the book of the apocalypse, that's kind of where people get confused. Because they think, oh, book of the apocalypse, well, it's the end of everything. So clearly that's what that means. It's like, no, it's just another name for revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's effectively what sometimes it is like judgment. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's of a blessing or of a promise that is to come. Sometimes it's communing. Sometimes it's revealing something like the Ten Commandments, or what's also called the Decalogue. There's a revealing of something. And so effectively what you have here is because the mountain is viewed as like typically God's mountain. If you're ascending the mountain to meet with Yahweh, something divine is about to happen. And that divine thing is either going to be a revealing, him testing you, him, you going up there and doing some kind of sacrifice. In fact, if you look at like Samuel's and the kings, it frequently says that the kings would go and destroy the temples in the places because that's where they put their temples. Because that's how they viewed idols and temples, was that the temple was like a micro mountain. And so why not put the micro mountain on the mountain? So that way it was like the house on the mountain for the gods. But then they also provide the statues, which is kind of in the ancient Near Eastern mindset, was like the idea of like you could like summon the god down into them, which is partly why Exodus 20 is so against the idea of idols. Is one, because God already establishes idols, which is human beings, his images. I mean, that's just what the word is in Hebrew, but also because God cannot be domesticated. He cannot be beckoned. He cannot be summoned into a place and be forced into a little thing. He's like, no, you don't box me in. I tell you to build my tabernacle. I tell you to do this, so I may dwell there. You don't control me. I'm not your little pet.
So,
which in my mind, I was thinking about this in the car, is like, it kind of plays into the sinful problem of the rebellious spiritual beings and rebellious humans. The spiritual beings are trying to draw them further away from God, but also, and so for themselves, but the humans are also like, I think I can control the gods a little bit, but also I can't. So they're like afraid of the gods, but also like can kind of control the gods. And it's this weird mixture of like, there's this tension still, even though they're loyal in some essence, there's still that tension of pride of who is really in charge within all that, which is a wild concept when you just kind of boil it down to the issue of sin, is that it doesn't matter who is really in charge. Someone else is going to desire to be in charge of you. Whereas God is just in charge, and he's like, it's just better for you all if I'm left in charge, not because I have a pride about it, but because I know what will be better for you, which is drastically different. Like, I think I know what's better for you, so therefore I'm going to do what I think is going to be better for you. But that's what these mountains are. They would be this place for divine moments, whether it be revealing, testing, for communication regarding like revealing in a different sense. Like, I guess revealing is communication, but revealing like the here to tell them these things, and then communication of like calling onto them for a mission that they're going to go do, whether it be just by demonstration, like Moses when he's supposed to go and to Pharaoh with his staff, but then he pawns it off to Aaron because of fear. And that plays a lot into, I guess, what we're going to get into with these cosmic mountain moments, is the different testings or the different revealings or divine moments that are going to happen on these mountains, the different times that the people are going to go up. And the question is going to be, I guess, effectively, is who will ascend the mountain? That is the longing question of who can really ascend the mountain, who can really be in the presence of God and bring God's people back there with them. And that's going to be the fun little journey that we're going to be going on, I guess.
Well, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do you have other, I guess, thoughts or reflections? I know I said a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, you really hit a really broad range.
I know. I take that as a no. No
Wow,
more
that went
rock
right over
puns.
your head, my guy. Range.
I guess I
Mountain
didn't hear you.
range.
Oh my! I didn't hear it. I
I've been
heard broad.
sitting on that one for like at least 25 minutes.
I only really focused on the broad part. I was really thinking of the range.
Oh, man.
Are you sitting there with mountain jokes on your computer?
Here, hang on. I'll share my screen real quick. So
I just heard you typing.
I have begun my notes. These are, of course, extremely important.
No, they're not.
I can't repeat jokes.
You're going to by accident.
I probably will at some point. But
Now, if you look at my notes for Genesis 2, it's going to be a long one.
no, I know. I haven't even touched it yet. I still have to look at things. So that's going to be the beginning of my notes. And of course, I put the most important section first.
Of course. You don't need to worry about the Septuagint as much unless you really, really want to.
I mean, I'll probably pull it up for when we're talking, but other than that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's going to be a fun time. It's going to be a very different journey than the Chaos Waters.
Okay. All right.
Fun.
Well, I'm excited for different.
Yeah, me too. It'll be fun.
Well, we invite you to ascend the mountain with us by subscribing and liking to the channel. Once you hit that subscription, it'll pop up that beautiful little bell there. Go ahead and give that a little rappy tap tap. It'll let you know of every time we post, and you won't miss a beat. We really do appreciate all the support you've given us, and we pray that if the Lord wills it, we will see you in the next video.
Yeah, guys. See you next time. Lord willing.